Hey, this is Nicky G and welcome to Better Commander. Today we're talking about Ezuri Claw of Progress, $100 Infect deck. Ezuri Claw of Progress. This guy's like a completed version of Ezuri Renegade Leader, and when you get completed, you kind of turn into an oily Terminator. Yeah. +1/+1 counters have been a solid strategy since the beginning of MTG and Commander. You can get a ton of mileage out of a budget commander like Ezuri. He's in Simic colors, so you know we'll be drawing lots of cards, and we might even luck into a combo or two. This commander generates some weird tension. We're going wide to get experience counters, then dumping all the +1/+1 counters onto one creature to go kinda tall. It's a different dynamic for sure. The cool thing is that we can proliferate experience counters and +1/+1 counters, and the experience counters stick around even if Ezuri goes splat. Alright, let's read the dang card. Ezuri Claw of Progress, 2 green and a blue for a legendary creature, Elf Warrior. It's a 3/3. Whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you get an experience counter. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is the number of experience counters you have. I whipped up a sweet Ezuri deck that can be had for under $100, and you can slap your opponents silly with creature-based removal, the evolved mechanic, and the dreaded boogeyman of players who haven't really thought it through yet, Infect. Infect makes sense in a deck where we're putting a lot of counters onto one creature. Ezuri's ability to pump a creature can give us a leg up on Infect damage, but that's still a secondary win condition. I put about 12 creatures in this deck that can infect our opponents, and I tried to keep them cheap to trigger Ezuri and get us experience counters. Take for example Viridian Corruptor. It's 1 green for a creature, Phyrexian Elf Shaman. It's 2/2 with Infect. When Viridian Corruptor enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact. I also put a couple more expensive creatures into the deck to finish. Spinebiter's 4 green for a creature, Phyrexian Beast. It's a 3/4 with Infect. You may have it assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. I also put in there Phyrexian Swarmlord, which is also 4 green for a creature, Phyrexian Insect Horror. It's a 4/4 with Infect. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green Phyrexian Insect creature token with Infect for each poison counter your opponent has. You also want to take note that those little tokens will trigger Ezuri's ability. That means cards like Hornet Queen and Avenger of Zendikar trigger our guy multiple times. One of my all-time favorite cards, Fathom Mage, goes great in this deck. Whether it's evolving or we're putting counters on with Ezuri's ability, it'll draw us a bunch of cards. We also have Simic Manipulator. This guy won't set the world on fire, but we can get utility creatures or snag an opponent's commander if we have enough experience counters. Herald of Secret Streams. I love Herald. We'll get our attackers through. This guy has the lowdown on the secret streams, brother. Also slap the old Dryad Arbor in there. These weird little tree folk trigger Ezuri, and I'm surprised I don't see this card more often. Also put in Mosswarp Bridge. It's a land with Hideaway 4. So when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. Exile 1 face down, then put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Enters the battlefield tapped. Also has tap, add green, and green and tap. You may play the exile card without paying its mana cost if creatures you control have total power 10 or greater. This is another one of those cards I don't understand why you aren't using. Get it in your creature decks. So at some point we want to win this game, right? So let's bring out the Sage of Hours. It's 1 in a blue for a creature, human wizard with heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Remove all +1/+1 counters from it. For each 5 counters removed this way, take an extra turn after this one. This is one of our other win conditions. It isn't hard to finagle infinite turns with the Sage once you get to 5 experience counters with Ezuri. And then we have Simic Ascendancy, green and a blue for an enchantment. It has 1 green and a blue, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. That's pretty good. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. At the beginning of your upkeep, if it has 20 or more growth counters on it, you'll win the game. Gotta love that text. Alright, great. We have a couple ways we can win and in the most Simic ways possible. We have Sage of Hours, infinite turns. We have Simic Ascendancy with all the counters. We have combat damage. We have Infect damage. I think everybody needs an Infect deck, so if you don't have one, consider Ezuri. This will inflame the passions of your opponents as they choke on the poison you've created to contaminate the veins with this oily Terminator. This is going to be Nicky G from Better Commander, signing off.